So the players headed down to the Calabogie Boogie. Riley, Charles, and Chris on the right there. We had our morning briefing, and then Chris and I were off. Chucky actually decided to just kind of hang around, and since he doesn't have a dual sport bike, right away on the first straightaway, we saw somebody had shot off down the ravine and was being pulled out by a rope. Then I turned the camera off until we got to the first obstacle. Looks like everybody else bypassed it, but everybody else is just a little bit smarter than Chris and I. Chris, with those low intakes on the HP2, actually just barely made it without sucking in any water. On the F800, the intakes are quite a bit higher, so wasn't too worried, although it was still quite deep in one spot. And there was some fast movers still passing us, guys on real dirt bikes. Then we hit some hydro line. Lots of rocks on this ride. A little more water. Luckily, we're used to water where we ride on the weekends. Then it kind of opened up into some actual gravel road. And it's turned out to be quite a nice day. Here we see the beautiful lake, Calabogie Lake. The format for the day was some off-roading and then some gravel and even some pavement to kind of link all the sections together. And then, of course, the more you enjoyed the ride, the less attention you paid to the GPS. So especially at the beginning of the day, we had a few spots where we missed turns.
Let's just cut off. It's going to save us some time anyway.
We weren't the only ones. Got lost.
Yeah, we missed a turn.
There's some really beautiful country out there around Calabogie. We started off at the golf course. Then we ended up on, I guess this is the K&P Trail, an old abandoned rail line. Some good puddles. Relatively smooth with the just the occasional chunky section. Everybody we met on the trail was super nice. Everybody was always willing to slow down, move over, and let us go past. Then it was lunchtime. Most of the guys on the actual dirt bikes without plates were already there. Super well organized. There was gas available at lunch, barbecue. There's Cousin Charles on the left.
Wave to the camera, Chucky.
Then we found out Cousin Charles was actually doing the basic dual sport route on his ZRX1200. So I spent a big part of the day with people asking me, who is that guy?
Through the aggressive, so I'll go last.
Then we got to the first aggressive section, and I decided to go tail end Charlie since I was going to be the slowest. We also met up with a couple of guys, can't remember their names. One guy was on a KLR, one guy was on a Honda 650. Our fearless leader got lost. While Chris was lost, we heard a rumbly pipe coming. We thought it was him, but no. It was Cousin Charles on the ZRX. Interesting note, it looks like as of today, the Cousin Charles just bought a G650X Challenge BMW. There's Chris. Chris had entered the wrong route in his GPS. And then there was a lot of button pushing and people staring down at their handlebars, then you knew we were lost. We got onto this hydro line, which was quite nice, but lots of rocks. Not the greatest place for the big bikes. Occasional little low spots. If they were really wet, there was actually a bypass. Every now and then you'd zip off the hydro line back into the forest. and lots of rocks. Now in this nice section, you can actually hear my skid plate. Oh, right there. That was my skid plate getting about a 2-inch dent in it. Lifted the front wheel right off the ground. Right after this, I was looking down at the dash to see if the oil light was going to come on, but the factory plate did its job. Every now and then, we'd pop back out onto an actual real road.
That was bloody lovely.
In this case, it wasn't too long before we veered off once again back into the hydro line. I found it easier to be tail end Charlie on the F800 since I was the slowest over most of the rough sections, and this way I didn't feel like anybody was hurrying me. Lots of rocks. The F800 doesn't really like cruising along in first gear because the throttle's kind of snatchy, so most of the sections, if I can be in second gear, it's a lot easier to modulate. Some pretty good hill climbs. Spent a lot of time rubbing along the sides in the trees trying to avoid the worst of it. And then the trail, this is steep. It doesn't look steep, but this is steep. And that was as far as I got. Luckily, Chris and I had hooked up with these 2 other riders, so we had 4 guys to help me lug the bike up this little 20-foot section. Once we were up that one little section, it was only probably 25 feet. Then I was able to get going again. This was a nice, long climb. And then, sadly, the poor boys who had come down to help me had to walk the entire length of this hill back up to where they had left their bikes, just up here at the crest. Now, not only were there nice uphills like this one, there were some pretty gnarly downhill sections. I'm not even sure if this was on the route because a few times we did get off the route. In one section, we actually got over a kilometer off the main route. I find in these sections, you know, you're pretty focused on following the road, not really looking down at the GPS. This was one of those situations where we got quite a ways down here, and there was about a 3-foot drop off here, and then we weren't sure what laid behind it. We also noticed that our friend on the KLR, who knew the route, hadn't followed us down this section.
No, well, oh. So nice and light.
So we
I like it.
grabbed the bikes and turned them around. The little Honda, man, sure felt light. Even the HP2 didn't feel like that too much to manhandle, especially with 3 guys. Some portions of the ride I didn't bother videotaping just because it was long stretches of road or it was dusty and then the camera lens gets dirty about every 15 seconds. Anyways, we got back out of there, got back on track, and up here at the top of the screen you can see we met up with our buddy on the KLR, and then it was back out to civilization. Then a little bit of hydro line, the same route we ran in the morning. This was leading us right back to the golf course where it started. Same water crossings going the other way. when we got to this one,
Yeah.
since it almost flooded Chris's bike on the morning, he decided to take the bypass. The bypass looked pretty bumpy to me, so I knew my bike could ford that much water, so I decided just to plow right through. You know it's deep when the motor goes quiet. Chris and some of the other guys I was riding with decided to do the grass course.
It'll just be a disaster in there for me.
I decided to go get a
All
beer.
right, I'll see you there at the bar.
From here, it was just a short ride back to where everybody was parked at the Calabogie Highlands Golf Resort. As soon as I got there, I saw Cousin Charles here on the right, relaxing on the
Charlie.
grass.
The other guys are doing that timed course thing.
Then it was the next morning, and we started in a gravel pit about 10 kilometers from where we started. It was going to be Chris and I and Eduardo on his 650 Honda. And then basically it started raining, so there's not much footage today, although the trails today were pretty gnarly. Eduardo lost his front brake and didn't finish the ride with us. At one point, who did we stumble upon? But there he was, Cousin Charles, doing the basic route on the old ZRX. Sadly, we don't have any footage of some of the best riding of the weekend, which was this last 40 kilometers or so of Hydroline. Anyways, good time, well-run show, and hopefully we'll be back next year.